and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 218, and today's date is November 18th, 2013, and the title of this episode is Preparations for the Next False Flag Are in the Works, and we see what is happening around the world. We're seeing what's happening in Syria, Iran. We are seeing what's happening in Libya, Saudi Arabia. Everything is completely coming together for the next false flag. We have the United States on one hand with the central bankers looking for peace and trying to push peace on Iran. We have Israel, Saudi Arabia, and France on the other side saying, no, there can be no peace. There has to be some type of war. We need to strike. And we see what is happening. They are creating this entire illusion that there's peace and there's strikes and things are going to happen. And we will get into this as we get through this report. Before I get started, I just want to welcome all those new subscribers on YouTube. And if you haven't visited the x22report.com site, come on over. Many things on the site. I have Sentinel alerts, which I put up all throughout the day. I comment on them, and you can read those. We also have the timeline of the economic collapse. If you look up top, it says the economic collapse tab. You click on that. And this is basically a story of what is happening. And it's dynamic. I keep changing it, and I keep adding things. We also have the people. This is a forum, and this is for like-minded people who are talking about the economic collapse. It is completely free to join. You make up some type of username. You put your email in there, and you are ready to go. You can also read what everyone else is writing without signing up as a guest. And when you feel comfortable, you can sign up and join in on the conversation. And for those people who are donating and have donated, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. It keeps the x22report.com site going and the people going. And as you know, it does cost money to keep this going. I do not have corporate sponsors on the site whatsoever. It is just me alone. And as the site grows, I will have to increase the server space and the server speed. And as you know, that does cost money. But I do appreciate those people who have donated, and if you like to donate, you can just go right on the front on the home page of the site, and there's a little PayPal donate button. You just click that. You can give any amount you want. It makes no difference. You can give $2, $10, $20, $50, whatever you feel is comfortable for you. And for those YouTube people who listen on YouTube, if you'd like to hear the report sooner, you can come to the x22report.com site. I upload it between 5 and 7. It is the audio version. You can download it. It's an MP3. And if you don't want to, you can wait for YouTube after it's processing, and I upload it to YouTube. That is usually done between 9 and 11, depending on how fast and the time it takes to upload it to YouTube at that time. Now, let's get into the economic collapse news. And what we're seeing in Spain right now is that Spain has more bad loans, and it is accelerating. It has not slowed down. The reason for this is we are seeing that there's a collapse in the property sector, and the loans have completely gone through this phase of reaccelerating, and these are all bad loans. They are at an all-time record high of 12.68%, and this is not looking good for Spain. And again, with high unemployment in the double digits, massive amount of debt, how are people supposed to afford their homes? They can't, and this is why you're seeing bad loans. And what do countries normally do? They try to tax the people that are still working to cover the loss of those who are not working. But guess what? That doesn't work either, because you can just tax them so much that after a while they can't live, they can't continue what they're doing, and the country eventually needs to go and borrow more money. And we're seeing this in France. I mean, they have taxed the wealthy. They did an increase in the VAT and other tax revenues, and guess what? They cannot keep up with the amount of interest on the debt and all the programs they have going. They fell short of $5.5 billion. And this just goes to show you this system that everyone is using does not work. High unemployment, massive amount of debt, interest on the debt, taxing the people who are still working. cannot keep the country going whatsoever. So what do these countries do? They decide to ask for more money. So they borrow more money. That gives them more debt, gives them higher interest payments. And guess what? They still can't meet the higher interest payments because the tax revenue that was coming in before couldn't meet the previous interest payments. So, they say, okay, then we're going to have to cut expenses, and they start laying off people in the government. So now there are less people working in the government to give to, which will add revenue to the country, and it just cannot be sustained. It's impossible. Here in the U.S., it's a little different. The Fed creates the money out of thin air and loans it to the government, and they continually do this. But if you really look, the U.S. is still running into the same problem. The debt is getting way too high, and so what are they doing? They are going and looking for any type of tax revenue they can. They're looking overseas. They're looking within the country to tax more people. And if you look at Obamacare, that's why there's a penalty on the insurance, because that's supposed to raise about $200 billion worth of tax revenue. There's also a 3.8% tax on people who are selling their homes, and that's going to raise tax revenue, and they are doing this all over. They even want to there's a bill out there that for every trade that goes on in the stock market, they want to put a tax on that. They wanted to do an online tax. It's tax, 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 tax. This is all you see because they can't support the debt, and they need to tax those who are still working. But guess what? If we keep going the way we're going, and I did this in my report about, 3, 4, 5 reports ago, in the next 4 years, if we keep going the way we're going, there are going to be more people out of work than there are people working. So this cannot work. So what do they need to do? Well, the central bankers know this. The U.S. government knows this. This is why they will create the next false flag to get the war started, because they need to keep everyone's attention off of the collapse and who's responsible for the collapse. So what they do is they move everyone's attention to someplace else, and that is exactly what they're going to do. Here in America, what we're seeing is the National Association of Home Builders, the sentiment dropped to its lowest since June. This is the third miss in a row. Now, how could that be? Well, let's go over what's happening in real estate. Well, what do we see here? We see mortgage applications plunging. Since mortgage applications are plunging, guess what's going to happen next? Sales are going to start to decline, and we're seeing that now. Traffic to new home builders declining. We are seeing mortgage companies, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, all laying off thousands of people in their mortgage departments. 1-800 East Coast Mortgage closed their mortgage business completely. Now, why would they do that if housing is booming? Well, it isn't booming. The people who are purchasing the homes are hedge funds, investors, and they are purchasing these homes in cash. But guess what? They're looking to get out of homes right now. They want to sell these homes to flippers, speculators, people who really can't afford the homes. And this is why you see these loans out there now being supplied to those people who really can't afford, don't need a down payment, barely are, if you have so-so credit, you can get a loan. We saw this happen from 2006 to 2008, and you know how that ended up. Now, Walmart is out there saying that Obamacare is going to hurt consumer spending and retail sales. And they're saying because of the penalties and forcing everyone to buy health insurance that they normally wouldn't have purchased before, or they're dropped cheap insurance and now they have to pay triple what they were paying. Now these people do not have extra cash on hand to spend in stores. And especially what is going on in businesses, those businesses that only supply that are only going to supply insurance to one spouse and not the other, and the other spouse has to go out and purchase insurance on his or her own. This is also going to be a drag. So Obamacare is not going to be good for the economy. And what are businesses going to do when the business mandate comes into effect? Well, we saw them already starting. We saw Home Depot starting. We saw Forever 21 starting this. They cut people's hours from full-time to part-time, and they try to keep it under a certain amount so they don't have to be penalized and provide health insurance. This is not going to help the economy. All this is going to do is help the health insurance industry and the government create tax revenue. It's going to hurt business. It's going to hurt people who are just barely getting by. Now they have to pay for something they really didn't want. And this is not going to work out well at all. And people were saying this before Obamacare even came into effect, and now we're seeing the repercussions of what is actually happening, and it's exactly what everyone was saying. And guess what? Congress did not vote on this for the people. They didn't even read it. They don't even understand it. And this is why it was shock to them that the staffers in the government couldn't pay for this and had to be bailed out by Obama. The government is paying for their premiums because it was too expensive. They couldn't afford it. They didn't want to pay the penalties. Guess what? If you notice, not one government official was forced to purchase this great insurance. None of them went to the exchange. None of them had to go get it. Why? Because they have insurance, which is a lot better. If this was for the people, they should have been the first to go online, sign up, and get their Obamacare. And guess what? Not one did it. Actually, the president should have been right there sitting in front of the computer showing people how great this is and how he wants it. But why didn't they do it? Because they know it sucks. That's why. And it's not for the people. Okay. Now, foreign investors are now dumping their stocks in fear of the stock market crashing. And what have we seen today? We saw the Dow reach 16,000 points. We've seen the S&P hit 1,800, and we've seen gold being pushed down again. All eyes on the stock market. If the stock market's going up, that means the economy is recovering. Well, that's what they want us to think. We know it's not. And we saw this happen during the Great Depression. We saw this in the dot-com. We saw this in 2007, 2008, where each time the markets reached all-time new highs. And guess what happened? They all came crumbling down big time. This is going to crash like no one has ever seen before. But right now, foreign investors have already sold off $16.9 billion in U.S. equities. This was the fourth largest equity outflow in history because they realize this is a bubble. And I noticed all over the mainstream media or the corporate media or whatever you want to call the script reading people, they are sitting there and trying to convince everyone that it's different this time, that this is not a stock bubble. Yellen's out there, Bernanke's out there. They're all telling you, no, there's no bubbles, there's no problem, everything looks good. They also told us in the same year the stock market crashed in 2008. They told us they weren't forecasting a recession. They told us the subprime was contained. And they told us there was no such thing as a stock bubble at all, and they're not forecasting anything like that whatsoever. And in the same exact year, the whole entire thing came crashing down. So really, it's actually the opposite of what they're saying. And just take a look at what everyone is doing. This is the great rotation. The people are getting out at the height, selling to the retail investor who thinks the market's going to go higher. They're gobbling that up, and they're going to be holding all this stock as it comes crumbling down. Now, the Supreme Court kind of dismissed the NSA phone tracking complaint. And you have to think, is the Supreme Court being blackmailed by the NSA. Because you have to remember, the NSA is capturing all the email, phone calls, internet usage. They intercept everything. So you know they have something on the Supreme Court members. And this is, of course, what the NSA is doing is completely in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Doesn't matter how they spin it, they are. But if you notice, the Supreme Court always backs down. And what this goes on to say is the Supreme Court announced Monday morning that it would not be considering at this time a complaint filed months earlier that challenged the legality of the National Security Agency's Dragnet telephone surveillance program. And, you know, there's really, it's just unbelievable to me that they're not even going forward with this or taking it to the next level. And this just makes me think that the NSA is completely and totally blackmailing the people on the Supreme Court. Now, don't worry, everyone, because since they can continually spy on everyone, the FBI has a new cell phone spying device which removes all privacy. Now, how does this device, its code name is Stingray, it's also known as Triggerfish, IMSI Catcher, Cell Site Simulator, or Digital Analyzer. And this is a sophisticated portable spy device able to track cell phone signals inside vehicles, homes, insulated buildings, it doesn't really matter. The device acts as a fake cell tower, allowing police investigators to pinpoint location of a targeted wireless mobile by sucking up phone data such as text messages, emails, cell site information. And this is how it works. When a suspect makes a phone call, the Stingray tricks the cell into sending its signal back to the police, thus preventing the signal from traveling back to the suspect's wireless carrier. But not only does Stingray track the targeted cell phone, it also extracts data off potentially thousands of other cell phone users in the area. And right now, you know, they don't have a problem with this whatsoever. They don't believe this is in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And this was originally intended for terrorism, but instead they're using it on the people inside America, and they are tracking everyone's cell phone. They are using this device, and they're saying they don't need a warrant to do this at all, which, I don't know if I remember in the past, if you had a landline type of system, they always needed a search warrant to listen to a call, to get any information. Oh, let me say, if they need information from a phone carrier, they need to get a search warrant, and the phone carrier gives them the information. So why is this above the law? Makes no sense to me. Now, the TSA is going to make it easier for everyone in the airport. No, they're not. I'm kidding there. They have created these new detention pods, and what this does is this will be in all major airports before you know it. As you're walking out of the airport, they will temporarily hold you in a pod. It looks like one of those rotating doors that swing around, and it just stops and traps you inside. And it keeps you there for a certain amount of minutes. And when they feel that it's all clear, there's an electronic voice, and it gives whoever's in the pod permission to leave. So basically, everyone is a threat now to the national security, because as you're leaving, you will be held in this pod, and I don't know what the pod does while you're being held in there, and then the voice says, okay, you're free to go. So you're being jailed and then let go. Again, this is against all of my rights, and I am being detained at this time. But it seems like no one has a problem with this. And again, this is a violation of every single amendment out there. Okay. Now, Britain has an Operation Bag Him. The MI6 is going undercover in the Moscow embassy, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to get Snowden. The British government is more avid in its desire to locate and possibly capture Snowden to the United Kingdom or the United States than is either the U.S. or the other governments of the Five Eyes Signal Intelligence, SIGINT partnership, which also includes Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The government of Prime Minister David Cameron has made it clear that it views Snowden, as well as those who have assisted him in the publication of NSA's and GCHQ's most closely guarded espionage secrets, as terrorists. So they are going undercover. They are going to try to get him, and we will have to watch this and see how this plays out. Now, as you know, the U.S., French, all the Western private central bank countries are all trying to get into Africa. And we know why, because of all the natural resources. They have gold, they have diamonds, lithium, oil, all of this. And what is China doing? Well, everyone is doing the same exact thing. They are all trying to get into the African nations. And right now, China will provide $1 trillion financing to Africa at this time. And what they went on to say is, we have plenty of money to spend. We have the budget for major projects. China has about 3.5 trillion of reserves of U.S. dollars, and we just cannot buy U.S. treasuries. So what does that tell you? That they rather take the U.S. dollars and purchase interest in the African nation instead of buying more treasury bonds. So this just goes to show you they're trying to get rid of their dollars by investing it into Africa. And right now the U.S. has been stationing troops in Italy so they can move easily into Africa, and French are already in Africa, and they are all fighting for the same exact thing, natural resources. But what is interesting about this is that China is using the U.S. dollar in Africa to build roadways, to build up their infrastructure, to help them mine gold, to drill for oil, and they are diverting that money away from treasury bonds. Okay, now Russia and India are holding a joint naval drill in the Sea of Japan, and India has also purchased a warship from Russia. And like I said in the past, every single nation is training, moving military assets, building up military assets in preparation for the next world war. And we see this happening all over the place. And Russia is specifically making a strategic play in the Middle East. I mentioned this on my reports, 2, 3, 4 of them ago, where they were making deals in Egypt to use their port and to supply them with weapons. And right now, as far as Egypt is concerned, several contracts have already been signed, including those on air defense system. And they might even ask Russia for additional aid. So we can see what is happening right now. Egypt is saying, bye-bye U.S., hello Russia. Saudi Arabia is doing the same exact thing. They're in talks with Putin. They're also making deals with China. And we see many other nations doing this. Turkey was looking to buy the Chinese missiles, but NATO and the U.S. put a huge amount of pressure on Turkey, and they backed away from that. And like I said in my other reports, the U.S. is losing control of the Middle East. Right now, Libya is having major problems, and I've said this before. You will know when it is a threat to the U.S. dollar, and the way you'll know this is the U.S. will send troops over. And here we are. In Libya, they feel there is a threat to the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, selling the Libyan oil. And we understand that the militants have taken over some of the oil fields. They're stopping production. So what does the U.S. central bankers do? And they always do this. This is stage one. They are sending in the troops to train the Libyan forces. We know what they are doing. They are sending in and establishing military presence in the the region. Because eventually, when the fighting continues and escalates, guess what? The U.S. already has troops there. They did this prior to the Syrian event where they brought in all the warships and the aircraft carriers. They brought over tanks, missiles, troops to Jordan, and they said this was for a drill, and they left them there because they knew those were going to be used for the Syrian strike, which actually never happened, but it was in preparation. They are doing the same thing in Libya. They realize there is a huge threat to the U.S. dollar, so they are moving in troops right now and using the illusion that they're going to change the Libyan forces, and eventually this will get out of hand and the war will begin and the fighting will start and more troops will arrive in Libya. Okay, now, like I said, the United States central bankers are losing control of the Middle East, and right now the Obama administration admits they are losing control of Saudi Arabia. The administration of President Barack Obama has acknowledged a dispute with Saudi Arabia, that there are problems. Susan Rice and other officials, I think Hagel, they're sending over to Saudi Arabia to try to iron this out, and they realize what is happening, and because of what happened with Syria, and this whole thing is completely falling apart in the Middle East for the central bankers, but we know they are planning a major false flag event. Of course, not too many people know about this because you don't want to blurt this out that it is a false flag event. So they are trying to keep everything as status quo until the event occurs. But until that time, they are totally losing control in the region. Now, there is leaked information, and this is all part of the propaganda for the false flag event. Leaked information from an Iranian dissident has reported that Iran has built a secret nuclear site. An exiled Iranian opposition group said on Monday it had information about an underground nuclear site being built in Iran, and that this was among a number of secret venues for an atomic bomb program. This right here is the build-up to the next false flag. If you notice, every single time I'm reporting on this, there's more news about a new threat from Iran or from Al-Qaeda or from other organizations or about cyber attacks. And right now, and let me just read this. This goes on to say that according to specific information obtained by the Iranian resistance, the clerical regime is establishing a completing parallel secret and undeclared sites for its nuclear project. And this is what they're going to use to say that's how they created the nuclear weapon, this is how it was delivered to the U.S., and this is how the false flag will occur. But let's move on. How are they setting all this up to work in their benefit? And you have to understand, they need to get into Iran and Syria and overthrow the governments there. That's their main objective, to place the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. So what did we see happen over the weekend in Syria? Well, we saw the rebels bomb a building that contained 31 troops and 3 generals and a brigadier general, and they all died in the bomb attack. And right now this goes on to say there is a speculation that rebels could have infiltrated the military base, as the explosive device was probably placed either inside or beneath the building in a tunnel, because if you watch the building collapse, it looks like it was a planned demolition actually, and the building just came crumbling down. And I do have a video on that on Sentinel Alert, so if you go on Sentinel Alert, just scroll down until you find the video, and you can see the building come crashing down. So already they're removing top generals, a brigadier general, a lot of troops, because again, they need the ability to get in there and overthrow Assad. And using a strike, it will make it a lot easier if they can get rid of these people ahead of time. And this is all playing into the next false flag event. So what are the Gulf states doing to prepare for this? Well, they know something's going to happen. They realize that something will happen. So right now the Gulf states aim is to integrate their air defense system to meet threats from ballistic and cruise missiles. And this goes on to say they're creating a missile defense shield to kill ballistic or cruise missiles before they are over land. And this is critical importance, they went on to say. The plan is for the Gulf to have an integrated missile system. Each country is putting together its own anti-air defense system, which will grow eventually toward a regional integrated system. We're hoping this can be settled within the next 3 to 5 years, and they are definitely getting prepared because they understand as time goes on, World War III will develop. And again, if you have to think back to World War II, it just, I mean, everyone didn't wake up and every single country wasn't in war. It started out slowly. Germany went to Austria, then they invaded Poland, and down the line. And all of a sudden, after many years, it broke out to a world war. And it went from 1936 all the way up to, 45, 46, around that time. So it was 10 years or so that this went on. And we're going to see the same thing happen here. It's going to start out in, Iran and Syria. Russia will start fighting. Other countries will start getting involved. It will expand. China and Japan, it will break out there. And this will be over many, many years. And we understand that this is definitely going to happen because this is what the central bankers, globalists, the elite, whatever you want to call them, want, because this helps them in many, many ways. First of all, it reduces the population. Secondly, it provides a huge amount of wealth because they can supply weapons to both sides. They don't care. And when it's all said and done, they believe they're going to restart the system. And the collapse and everything else is not blamed on them. Hopefully by then they're hoping that they get rid of the Constitution in the U.S. And this is how all of this is going to play out. There is also a report right now that Israel and Saudi Arabia are working together on a plan for a possible attack against Iran. So Israel and Saudi Arabia are secretly working together on plans for a possible attack. Now, I know Saudi Arabia was out there saying, no, we're not going to do this, and this is untrue. But again, do you really believe them? And, if the Geneva talks fail to roll back Iran's nuclear program, they are going to get ready to attack Iran. And, this is how this is all playing out, and this is all for what is about to happen. So we can see the preparations and how they are preparing for this next false flag event. And this is going further because you have to remember this event that's coming is not going to be a little event. This is going to be something really big and major, and it's going to include many different types of attacks. It's going to include a chemical. It's going to include a nuclear. It's going to include a cyber attack. So all of this is going to come into play. And right now, we understand that CISPA is pending in the Senate. And right now, the government is pushing for CISPA to be passed because the rate of cyber attacks are too fast and furious, and companies are not sharing their information. So they're trying to pass CISPA right now on the premise that these cyber attacks are coming really fast, and there's no clear way of getting information from companies because all these laws are in our way, and we need to get rid of these laws with CISPA. And this goes on to say when the threat is moving at 186,000 miles per second, as a photon does on the internet, there's no time to make that phone call. And the pace of cyber attacks was a key reason for Congress to pass legislation to encourage the private sector to share information on cyber threats. Companies can be slow to share information about intrusions or vulnerabilities out of concerns that doing so will create liabilities or damage to their reputation. So what CISPA will do is will remove all of that, and they won't have to worry about getting sued. And what they're trying to do right now is get this through, and they will once the cyber attack occurs. And we might see a cyber attack occur before the main one, or during that time they might say, hey, guess what? We have this pending in the Senate. We should just pass this now because there could be more cyber attacks on the way. Now, a U.S. Army officer, an expert on cyber security attacks, predicts a devastating attack in the near future. This goes on to say, U.S. Army officer who is an expert in cyber war at West Point says the world needs to expect one or two attacks against a physical system originating from cyberspace that will cause more damage than the Stuxnet virus and or worm, whatever you want to call it. And we understand that this next attack, and we understand that the Chicago Mercantile was hit by a cyber attack back in July. They're still investigating to see if any information was removed or compromised. They're not even sure if there was some type of virus or malware or worm planted in the system. The same thing with NASDAQ. We've seen many, many glitches in that, and we don't know if something had occurred or is planted in the system there. Now, the U.S. government, central bankers, Saudi Arabia, Israel, they're all out there, and they are creating the next evil terrorists. And this goes on to say that the intelligence officials and terrorism experts today believe that the death of bin Laden and the decimation of al-Qaeda, the core in Pakistan, only set the stage for a rebirth of al-Qaeda as a global threat. Its tactics have morphed into something more insidious and increasingly dangerous as safe havens multiply in war-torn or failed states. And the jihadist, who many terrorism experts believe is al-Qaeda's new strategic mastermind, Abu Musab al-Suri, which means the Syrian, has a diametrically different approach that emphasizes quantity over quality. Whereas bin Laden preached big dramatic acts directed by him and senior al-Qaeda leaders, al-Suri urges the creation of self-generating cells of lone terrorists or small groups in his 1,600-page internet manifesto. There they are to keep up attacks like multiplying fleas on a dog that finds itself endlessly distracted and ultimately dysfunctional. Al-Qaeda's capabilities for a strike into the United States are more dangerous and more numerous than before 9/11. For better or worse, the only hope to track them all is an exceptionally deep, organized, and free-ranging intelligence apparatus, which means more spying on the American people to keep up, this threat that there are terrorists out there, and we need more types of intrusions into our lives and spying on the people. And they have been tracking al-Suri, his rise, for years, but they cannot find out where he is at this time. Just like bin Laden, they had no idea where he was. And what this goes on to say is that some officials suggest that to stop them and to track them, they need to increase the amount of the NSA's monitoring against these potential threats. They need to expand the NSA, and we can see where and what they are doing at this time. They are moving this to the next stage. They are building up the next bin Laden. They're putting the evil face on terrorism, and this is in preparation for the next false flag event, and we know this is coming very soon. They are preparing everyone. They're letting the propaganda out there to make everyone believe that there are lone wolves. There is a new mastermind, the Syrian, and you're going to see definitely something happen. Now, there is another simulated real-time cyber attack on banks taking place on December 12th. And there are about 200 banks next month which will be required to participate, and this is another potential false flag event. This doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's something we like to keep an eye on. And I always keep the potential false flags on the right-hand side so we can keep an eye on what has been going on. And of course I can't capture all of them, but I'm trying to capture the main ones. And later on in time, just like we saw the Grid X drill, a month or two down the line, when the power goes out, we can say, this is why, but I was prepared for it because I have food, I have water, I have toiletries, I have batteries, I have all the things that will keep me going in this time of need. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.